Public School Board public hearing for the 2020-2021 proposed budget is now called to order. All board members are present, and so therefore we have a quorum. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda for today?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved by Dr. Sivak and seconded by Ms. Harrison. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? There being none, the motion is approved. Is there anyone on for public comment? There being none, we will move on to the presentation on the budget.
Dr. Sivak, do you want to say a few things, or I can start and pitch to you, or?
Yeah, Dr. Green, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay. Just wanted to, just welcome everyone. Thank you, of course, for your time this afternoon. Keep you too long, but definitely wanted to and excited to share a bit more insights, more detail, and the content around the budget that we are developing and have developed for this coming year. As you'll hear from Ms. Miller, our Chief Financial Officer, in just a minute or two, this was not an easy budget to develop. There's been lots of late nights, lots of consternation, several conversations that actually Ms. Miller and Ms. McGrew, who's also on the line, Mary McGrew, who've been working really hard with others of us and taking lots of feedback from Eric Green and several other folks just to get us to a place where we've got a budget and it's one that's not a work of fiction and that it's one that is in keeping with the realities that we're living in right now and the compounding implications of and ongoing implications of COVID and several other just kind of realities that we have. So I won't say much more, but just to start with a huge thanks to Ms. Miller and Ms. McGrew for their work and their leadership. A huge thanks to our board in general, and especially to Dr. Sivak and his leadership of the Finance Committee. We and they are continuing to build that committee out and the functioning of the committee to ensure that they hold us accountable for doing the work that we're called to do, being great stewards of the public funds, but also in doing so that we're being very strategic and thoughtful about how we utilize those funds and those resources to reach the outcomes, ultimately, the outcomes for children and families. So with that, I'll pitch it to you, Dr. Sivak, and then on to Ms. Miller, who will walk us through the agenda this evening.
Well, thank you, Dr. Green. And again, I actually feel as if you outlined it very well. Again, you know, there are a number of challenges in general, you know, both with COVID-19 and the pressure that's put on the state budget, and we're not immune to those pressures. And again, I would just echo the same appreciation that you did to Ms. Miller and her team, and frankly, the whole district. I mean, the reality is every department in the district has been asked to lean in to develop this budget and to identify places where reductions are needed or cuts are needed. So this is a budget that belongs to all of us. While the board will certainly adopt it and Dr. Green and his team will implement it, it's all of our budget. And again, Ms. Miller, thank you and your team for bringing the numbers into balance. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green and Dr. Sivak. And again, I appreciate the work and I appreciate the push. It has been one of the most challenging budgets that we've seen, that I've seen, I know, in my 16 years. And we enjoy the work. And so it is our goal to make sure that what we do is, as Dr. Green says, realistic and something we can live into, but then that does continue to support all the activities of the district. And again, Mary McGrew is on the line. She's our budget coordinator. She's been my rock, and I had her on the phone, I think, for hours on end the last couple of days. I was at home, and so I was challenging her, and she was probably sick of me, but I appreciate her and being her willingness to be my eyes in the office. We'll start with the presentation, and board members, a lot of this we did cover in the work session, but I just want to give some highlights, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail. So I'm going to share my screen, I believe. Are you seeing the budget hearing? Okay. Okay, so of course, as we start all of our presentations, we want to support the vision and the mission of the district to prepare scholars globally, to contribute locally, and to be fulfilled individually, as well as the mission statement is developing scholars through world-class learning experiences. We, in finance, we take it as our commitment, but we support commitment number 5, which is the culture of accountability and excellence. We believe that having finances and the business operations that support this commitment, we hold each one of us accountable to that and to excellence in our work. And so we support directly, in our minds, commitment number 5. The objectives tonight will be just a brief overview of the process that we've gone through, an overview of the proposed budget, and then our next steps. As we've been talking, this process is not one that we entered into the last couple of weeks. It's been going on since basically November, where our senior leadership team worked with their departments to identify budget projects, and we identified those and evaluated and prioritized those. We have developed our strategic priorities. We've been working with the team to finalize enrollment and staffing projections, our revenue and expenditure projections. We've had a couple of finance meetings. I appreciate you again on the work session. I put in here that we did have the advertisement of notice and tax effort that we'll talk a little bit about today. I'll just give you a little bit more information. We're doing the public hearing at this point, and then the budget adoption is slated for June 23rd at noon. I believe board members may have seen the advertisement that was in the paper yesterday, if not last week. By Mississippi Code, we are required to have an advertisement in the paper that outlines our intention to have, of course, a public hearing to consider the budget and also the tax levy. The unique thing about this code is that it also just prescribes the exact wording that must be included in the ad, which is what we found. It does, the wording of the ad does indicate that there may be a tax increase, but of course, board members, we've spoken about this, and that is not a projection that we have for the budget for this year. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that when we go to our debt service. As Dr. Green said, this has not been an easy budget process. This has been one of the more difficult ones that we've had to do this year. The revenue for district maintenance, ad valorem is projected, and other revenue is projected to remain flat. I believe, Ms. Johnson, you asked me at our last work session how much we had collected on total ad valorem last year. And so total ad valorem, which is operations and includes debt service, was $97,601,554. $97,601,554. Our total request was $97,365,739.63. So we actually gained about an additional $235,000 over what we requested. So ad valorem is still projected to remain flat. We will see some loss of revenue from our 16 section leases. Of course, we traditionally use about $1 to $1.2 million of 16 section revenue to support operations. Of course, with the loss of the Entergy project, we will see some reduction there. Also, some of our other lessees have declined to renew, but we are seeing a few people coming in and wanting to look at some of our 16 section properties. So we're still continuing to pay real estate agent and try to get some folks into our leases. MAP, of course, is because it's based on ADA, we talked about that in our work session. We are seeing some decline there because of course, our ADA. We have projected this budget with a 10% reduction in MAEP. That was what the initial information was given to school districts. However, we are in constant contact, Dr. Green, through his superintendent's groups and other connections, and the legislature is talking about the possibility that that may not be come to fruition, but we are still recommending that we use the 10% as a budget for the year. Of course, if that comes in with a less of a reduction, which is a good thing for us, we will certainly adjust the budget at this time. As we discussed in the work session, we are recommending to use $2 million in fund balance just to balance this budget at this point, which would take us somewhere to about 9% based on our projections with our revenue. And so we still would be above the required 7%. In expenditures this year, we do have to fund the teacher step increase, although the teacher pay increase bill did fail or is not coming out of the legislature this year. There is still a teacher step increase that has to be given, that annual step increase, and that's about $1.2 million. Health insurance increase, I think we spoke about this last year, mid-year last year, we received notice from Department of Finance and Administration that there was going to be a 30% increase on the district side of Blue Cross Blue Shield. And since the district pays for all of the employees' we pay that part of their health insurance, we have estimated now a full year of that 30% increase. We also are projected to have an increase in our general liability and property insurance. We've been in constant conversation with our insurance consultants. We have a number of buildings, of course, that you know that are closed, that we are not using, which is a higher liability on the district, as well as the implications of COVID and the industry that and how that's affecting insurance as a whole. I think, of course, we've all probably noticed that insurance companies are giving refunds back to folks for their auto refunds and sometimes. So, but we're seeing that there is a general increase in liability. Dr. Chrysler is working with Dr. Cormack and the insurance consultants to provide a more detailed renewal price before the end of this calendar year, this fiscal year. Of course, we've talked about the charter school payments. We have projected an increase of about $1.4 million. So that increase is included in this budget to go from 5.5 to $7 million. But while we've had some challenges, we have recognized some savings. And not only has the reorganization of the district that we started last year has continued, we have, of course, looked at the Optimizing for Equity plan. We have reevaluated our class sizes and our vacancies in central office and in non-instructional areas, which gave us a savings of approximately $4 million. Again, as we looked at class sizes, they still remain at 22-to-1 for the elementary level and 24-to-1 at the secondary level. And then it does allow us still some flexibility for hybrid or online learning opportunities if they, however that is going to look in the fall. We did look at our utilities and align them a little bit more with projected expenditures, and we had some savings there. We will be working very, very closely with Mr. Albright and his team as they come on board to make sure that we are really paying the bills that are due for us. This year, we did have some unusual bills because we have been working with the city over 2 years, for the last 2 years over the water bills. And we believe that we've gotten all of the past invoices and whatever those charges that they said were outstanding. We've gone for close to 2 years on working with them to make sure that we've got all that done. So we have been able to realign that, and we did some savings there. We also reduced technology and textbook purchases out of district maintenance to take advantage of the opportunities that will come with our CARES funding and our CARES allocation. As we talk about district maintenance, of course, that's the operating budget of the district. It not only does it include Fund 1120, but it also includes 1130, which is exceptional ed, alternative ed, athletics, vocation, and JROTC. Those are funds that are also supported by district maintenance. And then we also have the debt service funds. And I provided those debt service funds for you again, because this ties back to the notice of tax increase that we spoke about. So there was some concern, and I will say that I had 2 calls from citizens who were concerned that we were requesting additional dollars. And so what I'd like to do is spend a little time just going through this again. Board members, this is something that we have done and we have gone over, but for the public that may be listening, the current request for 2019-2024 ad valorem, and ad valorem request does include that operations district maintenance amount as well, is $97.3 million, $97,365,739.63. The request for 2020 is actually going down by $42,778.62. Now that should not make any real impact on millage. It should make millage remain the same. Again, $42,000 is not a tenth of a meal. So I would not imagine that there would be any change in meal, but there certainly should not be any tax increase. Again, the key is that we ask for dollars and the city sets the meals. So our request to the city of Jackson will be $42,000 less than what we requested this year. I think it should be noted too that the top line Fund 1120, which is district maintenance, that is the operations piece of taxes, and that number has not changed. That number has not changed since 2012. So the only change that we have seen and that we will continue to see unless something changes is that our debt service may change because of the bonds, the debt bonds. But what I've given you is also the next 3 years of requests. This is based on the projections, and this is based on the payment schedules for all the bonds. So as you see, the amount basically stays the same. There's a little bit of a fluctuation. I think one year about $18,000, and then it goes up about $25,000. But again, a meal is almost $1 million. So there should be no impact on any taxpayer as a result of the request from Jackson Public Schools, certainly for this year, and also, as you can see, for the next 3 years. MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program funding, is the funding mechanism for school districts. And currently, this is the way that all districts are funded. We went through this quite a bit at the work session, but I wanted to provide this to you again just as a comparison for the last several years. Of course, this is being driven by ADA, which is average daily attendance, the number of students that are in our schools 63% of the day in September and October. Base student cost is the amount that the legislature allocates for every student. And so you see that amount has increased slightly, but our ADA, our average daily attendance, did take a decline of about 1,500. There's been a constant conversation again about, of course, moving from average daily attendance to average daily membership. And it will be interesting to see, as Dr. Green talked about the impact of COVID, how COVID will have this an impact on the formula, because if schools are in a hybrid model, or if for some reason, for example, a school has to be shut down for 14 days, how do you count those children, and how will that have an effect on ADA? And I know that this is something that MDE is looking at, and how they can support schools, and we as on our side will be also watching this very closely. As I indicated before, we have included in this budget a 10% reduction of MAEP based on early projections. We are certainly hopeful that that number is not 10. As you can tell, that's higher than it has been in the last several years. So we have a projection, another kind of, as Dr. Green says, on the back of the envelope projection on some numbers that if it falls, if it's less than 10%, but we wanted to make sure that we gave what we have been told is probably worst case scenario. So that would give us a total MAEP allocation of $103.4 million. So in the district maintenance revenue, as we talked about earlier, the majority of our change has been in MAEP. So as I explained before, we have those other funds that get support from the district. They also get MAEP support as well. So the $83.7 million that is highlighted that is highlighted in the line 3150 is the amount that has been currently allocated to district maintenance. So when we spoke at the work session, I walked you through the process of how district receives a certain amount of money, and then the other funds also as well. Part of what we have done in the calculation of MAEP is we've also held out the $7 million for the charter schools. So although that payment comes from ad valorem, we hold it out of MAEP just as a where we balance it from. So we are projecting now a total budget for district maintenance of $184,817,349.61, a $4.9 million reduction of the current year. Of course, the majority of the district maintenance expenditures lies in people. And we have about 72% of our budget is salaries and fringe benefits. We've taken some significant looks at this budget, and as Dr. Green says, it is balanced, but we will be continuing to work on opportunities to continue balancing this budget to see if there are other opportunities for savings or supporting additional work. The 300 line item are contracts, and so salaries are salaries. The 200 area is the employee benefits, which includes that increase, that full 30% increase for health insurance on the district side. The 300s are the contracts that the district enters into, such as the contract with the Jackson Police Department, the contract with vendors such as Renaissance, things of that nature. The 400, the majority of that category is where utilities lie, gas, lights, water. That's where the majority of that is. The 500s, the majority of that is the insurance. Again, we projected that $500,000 insurance increase on our general liability and property. The 600 is in supplies, and where we were able to recognize a significant savings there was, as I mentioned before, the use of the COVID CARES, I don't want to say COVID, the CARES funding to support the purchase of textbooks, hardback and digital. We're looking at digital textbooks and digital learning opportunities for our students. So that's where the significant savings came from there. The 700s is where we have budgeted for computers. And again, as part of our spending plan for our CARES funds, we would like to use some of those dollars to purchase computers and technology, not only for our students, but our administrators and staff as well. And so we were able to reduce the support there. The 800s is basically, it's $22 million. There are two big line items there. $20 million is the repayment of the tax anticipation note that we do every October, November. And then the remainder of that is to pay the debt for the qualified school construction bond fund that is at Northwest Middle School. The 900s, the $10 million in 900s is where district maintenance supports those other funds, such as exceptional education, alternative education, vocation, and athletics. So I wanted to give you a review basically of all of the budgets that we have in the district. Dr. Green has challenged us to talk about the budget as a whole. And so this gives us some idea of the total budgets of the district. Of course, there may be some smaller little grant funds that we are getting. I know that Dr. Merritt and his team are working on another grant. And so we wanted to give you a basic outline of what we have so far. The district maintenance budget is being projected at $184,817,349.61. Exceptional education is at $18,875,250. Board members, I will remind you on exceptional education, we do have a requirement to budget what's called an MOE budget, maintenance of effort budget, which means that we have to budget a little bit more, no less than what we did in the year that we met MOE. And this is the dollar figure that we needed to have. We will continue to do this year as we did last year. We will provide you this $18.8 million budget for your adoption, and then we will immediately return to present you with a revised budget. We're working with Ms. Bingham to make sure that we are revising the budget to something that is reasonable and that is one that we can support, continue to support our exceptional education students, as well as now meeting maintenance of effort on expenditures. So we have two things we have to meet: maintenance of effort on budgets, and we have to meet maintenance of efforts on expenditures. Alternative education, of course, is at the capital city. That's $1.9 million. The athletic budget is remaining flat at $1 million. Vocation education is $5.7 million. Several weeks ago, Dr. Jackson brought that budget, actually that budget application, to the board to approve. And this is the amount that she did present for the budget. JROTC is budgeted at a slight reduction at $2.8 million. The debt service portion of the budget, the $24.6 million, is absent of the $72.6 million for district maintenance, because that amount is included in the district maintenance budget. So just for our debt, our GO bonds, our limited tax bonds, our limited tax notes, that, of course, that budget is $24.6 million. The child nutrition budget is being presented as well at $20,351,608.54. Dr. Merritt and his team have worked on the federal programs budgets for the various title program funds, and those budgets are being preliminarily given at $17.6 million. Of course, their fiscal year is different from our fiscal year, but we wanted to bring this forward to the board to know what they can expect as we move forward into October for federal programs. The same with IDEA and preschool. Dr. Bingham Gibbs is on the phone with us as well, and she received her final allocation, or as final can be, I think earlier in the week, and that total for IDEA is $6,183,894, with $133,951 allocated for pre-K exceptional education. So that's the federal side of exceptional education. Remember, it goes hand in hand with 1130, which is where the district has to also meet its obligations to our students with special needs. The CARES allocation is around $12 million. I did not have the exact figure today, but I will have that figure as we, I think Dr. Green will be discussing with you at a later date about our CARES application and how that will work. And so we wanted to include that here. Part of MAEP is that all school districts that had some obligations out there years and years ago to building and buses receives dollars to pay off that debt. We do have some buses that we leased or lease payment back in 2013 and 2014. And so we received the same $960,629 to pay that debt. The 16 section budget, as I indicated it early on, we will see some reductions there. It's going to be, we'll propose a budget of $850,000. And I included the activity funds. Although the board approves these dollars, these are not dollars that are supported by the district. These are not dollars that we are supported by tax dollars. These are student dollars. These are the dollars that they raise for cheerleader and drill team and football team and the like. I also wanted to include for you our capital projects budgets. We have 4 main projects, capital projects. The storm damage from 2015, I believe. We still have about $2.2 million remaining in that fund. We were the recipients of an allocation through Representative Deborah Gibbs to support a project at Callaway High School for lighting. And that is $100,000. And that actually does not require a district match, but this was something that Representative Gibbs fought for us to get out of the legislature. And so those dollars were allocated for Callaway High School. That project has been bid, and I know that Ms. Robinson and her team are working on bringing something forward for that. Back several years ago, we issued $2.5 million in limited tax notes to primarily support two major activities. The football field at South Jackson, which has been completely done at Forest Hill, and also to do some work at Wingfield High School. And so there's about $83,000 left there. And the big one is the 2018 GO bond construction funds. And so at this point, what we will propose for the remaining budget is $51.4 million. We have either obligated or expensed about 29% of the $72 million that has been allocated for those funds. And I know you, on every board meeting, we're seeing those projects going forward. And I have no doubt Ms. Robinson and Mr. Albright and Mr. McCracken will continue to utilize those funds and get those projects underway. So this is contemplating a proposed budget of all funds of $352,443,036.49. Our next steps is that Dr. Green challenged us last night, draft. Everything is draft. We are continuing to work on this budget. We're continuing to refine this budget. Ms. McGrew and I and her team have some detailed work to do to sharpen pencils and continue working to see if we can identify any other opportunities for savings or support for our instructional and our operations of the district. We are planning, though, a budget adoption on June 23rd, which will include the request for ad valorem request to the City of Jackson, which we will go ahead and submit. Again, that amount will not change. The deadline to get that to the City of Jackson is August 15th, 2020, but we try to get that to the City of Jackson as quickly as we can so they will be able to start their planning. We will continue to work to close out the current budget. That has to be done by September 15th of 2020. And I think Dr. Green will speak to our work with identifying additional funding to support the district.
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in right now just for a minute. Board members, we've been in conversation, certainly in the time that I've been here, about the our strategic priorities and the strategic support, especially from Kellogg Foundation. Over the past year, I'll say for sure, the past year, we've expanded conversations with some other potential funders, in conversations with, as you all know, the Bloomberg Foundation as well, more recently with Hewlett Foundation, as well as some other foundations around the state, Woodward Hines and some others who have demonstrated an interest in supporting our strategic work and who have kind of processed our strategic plan and commitments and see themselves in some of the very specific work there. And so we're excited about that. Wanted to just name, and we'll continue as we continue to bring you a budget, obviously the public dollars that you've got to, or that we need your approval for, want to also bring you kind of a total package of the funding that we're looking to utilize to advance the cause and to get the outcomes that we're all driving towards. We've submitted official and formal requests of funding from the Kellogg Foundation, almost doubling what we requested last year. So in excess of 1.5 million for this coming year. They have been very responsive, even over our closure due to COVID-19, and responsive to some of the immediate needs as we are planning and some of the needs around operations and devices and that. And so I'm very excited and just very pleased that they've been right along with us. That's separate and apart from the larger, more strategic requests that we made of them for the coming year. We should know, I would hope, in the next month or so, just what that will look like. But we've got other asks that we'll be submitting, as I said, to Hewlett and to others, just to continue to build out the pot of funds that I've talked previously about the work that we've got to do just to keep us moving forward. And then there's some work that we've got to do to kind of increase our trajectory and our incline as we look at student outcomes. And so that typically the private and additional funding is what helps you to do that, to fund those things that are more strategic and likely are added to the basic and day-to-day work that you've got to do. So just wanted to share that and let you know that we do continue that work. We're very excited about the prospects there and the relationships that we're building such that any additional funding is not just contemplating 1 year, which would, which would impact the kind of planning and of how long-term that planning and those solutions might be. But as you talk through some multi-year commitments from funders, it definitely changes the conversation for us and allows us to be more strategic and longer term in our thinking. So I'll stop there and to see if there are any questions about anything that's been presented, anything you want us to further clarify, or any comments that you want to make or need to make, board members.
I will have some questions, but first I want to say that this presentation was absolutely excellent. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Thank you, Superintendent Green, and of course, Dr. Sivak. I feel like the level of transparency has increased, that lay people could look at this meeting and be able to follow our budget and know exactly where we are, and that was very important to me. Also, it's important that I carry out my own fiduciary responsibility to understand our budget, and this report, this presentation has really helped with that. So I really do sincerely thank you. The highlights set a pathway for all of the things and changes that were being made in the budget. I thought it was excellent. My two questions are, when will we know about MAEP funding, what the decline will actually be? And in terms of insurance with the district, has the district been evaluated in totality in terms of insurance?
So MAEP, we likely won't know until hopefully the end of June. The appropriations bill is generally the last bill that is taken up by the legislature. Just following them with the failure with them not being able to fund the teacher pay increase bill for the second year, I'm very hopeful that we'll get an MAEP bill that will likely give us a little bit more of a relief as a district side. Not to go into the weeds, but last year, if you recall, or this year, as you recall, we received an MAEP allocation, and because of some calculation errors, we received a second allocation for the teacher pay raise, which was not included in our budget. This year, all of that was folded in. So I know that there has been some conversation with legislators and Mississippi Department of Education officials to say that basically by not having a fully funded or a closer to fully funded MAEP, you're basically cutting school districts twice. We're losing that extra dollar for the teacher raise that although you're not giving that second year, we still have to fund that. And we still have to fund that step because those lower steps, those lower grades were given a bigger raise. It was a $1,200 step now. So I would hope that by the end of June, we should have something. Of course, if we get it before June 23rd, that would give us some time to go back in and do some scrambling and adjust our budget. And quite honestly, there's a conflict in the law that we actually have until the August 15th date to get our budget adopted, but you can't actually operate July 1st without an approved budget. So we always err on the side of caution and want to have an adopted budget by June 30 that we can operate July 1. But certainly if the MAEP change comes after the adoption date, we'll bring back a revised budget to you as soon as possible. As it relates to the insurance, that's some of the work that the consultants were charged to do with this year, to do some evaluations. In this budget, there are two things that are included, small contracts. One is a small contract with a company called MedCore that they have recommended to us to assist us with our workers' comp claims. and getting those handled more timely and more efficiently. And then there's also a $20,000 contract in so that we will have a professionals to come in and evaluate our buildings. We have not had that type of work done before. And so when we present values of our buildings and statement of how much it costs basically to redo a building if we were to lose it, we have not had that done since I've been here. And so that's one of the things that our consultants feel, that though we're not necessarily reporting accurate building values. And so that is a cost factor when we start looking at that. We also talked about at our last meeting, check-in last week, about the likelihood of replacing a building that we're not using or we're taking offline. And do you really want to budget that at 100? Do you want to ensure that at 100%? Or there's some things that we're looking at, and they brought us a lot of ideas that we think will help. I think the biggest thing that we see for the increase is with COVID. And I think, of course, insurance companies are like anyone else. They take that opportunity to see some increases, but as well as the number of buildings, quite honestly, that we have that are vacant. Insurance companies don't like vacant buildings. And so we have had some interest with some buildings. We have had some talks about utilizing some of our buildings in other ways. And so we'll be working with Mr. Albright and his team to try to identify some uses of these buildings and get them either used, leased, or off of our inventory.
And since you mentioned, you good, President Johnson? Okay, and since you mentioned him, I'll take this opportunity to introduce Joseph Albright, Joe Albright, who's our new COO, and he's on the line with us. Mr. Albright, welcome. Excited to have you on the line here, talking about budget.
Yeah. It's the first thing we need to approach. And actually, to Ms. Miller's point, I have already asked Ms. Robinson to take on specific project about looking at how we can better market the properties that we have that are vacant. I've talked to other members of the team about looking at excess inventory, how we can remove that from buildings so that we can make them more available for marketing. So there are a number of things going on in that area.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Board members, any other questions or commentary or anything?
I just think it's a great budget, and I want to thank Sherilyn and her team and the Finance Committee for working so hard to get it done. And to echo what President Johnson said, it's really easily understood, and that's so very important. That's always been a concern of the board. So thank you all for your work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Ms. Miller mentioned this earlier, and so I'll just come back around. I know I understand there are some questions about our CARES funding and our plans for the use of that funding. I'll bring some guidance and some kind of where we are in our thinking about and our planning for those funds to the next board meeting. And so just want to kind of flag that for you. There's way more need than there are dollars. And while we did get in excess of 12, or are getting, stand to get allocated in excess of $12 million, when you start thinking about the needs that we have just with devices and connectivity, that money very quickly starts to dwindle. And so we don't yet have those funds. We, like everyone else in the state, will be submitting the actual request or application for those funds. We have submitted some indications to MDE, but we'll be submitting the formal application for the funds, and they've committed to turning them around pretty quickly. So you'll have more information on our plan for spending and utilizing those CARES dollars at the board meeting. If there's nothing else, then I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Sivak, or to Dr. Johnson to close us out.
Do you have anything, Dr. Sivak?
No, I do not. Just again, thank you. And I don't believe any action is required at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. We will not have any action until the 23rd.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. And we just encourage folks to tune into the meeting on the 23rd. Thanks,
All
Ms.
right.
Johnson.
Thank you.
With that being said, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Dr. Luckett has moved and Ms. Harrison, Dr. Harrison has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? There being none, the motion is adjourned. I mean, the meeting is adjourned.